So the Resident Evil 4 remake's already been out for a while, and I want to have a quick look at the trend of horror games getting remade as of recently, particularly started by Capcom themselves with the Resident Evil 2 remake back in 2019. This isn't going to be a review of any of those games, neither 4 or whatever, as I've not really played it, have I even bought it yet, but I am looking forward to when I eventually get round to it. It's mostly going to be looking at how a lot of horror games are getting remade, remastered or whatnot, particularly started by Capcom back in 2019. But you can argue they started remaking their games starting back in 2002 with the original Resident Evil, actually directed by its original director, Shinji Mikami. After that game, however, they never actually remade 2 or 3 or any others after that, because this was the time where Capcom was going into a more action-focused phase with Resident Evil, so they pretty much didn't want to remake any of their older survival horror classics, because they know they couldn't have done them justice, what with the market at the time. They wouldn't have started going back to making these older games after the release of Resident Evil 7 in 2017, returning the franchise to its horror roots with a new spin on it. However, now that they've done 3 and now 4, I kind of have to question how long is Capcom going to keep remaking these games. Are they going to do the original again? Are they going to do 5? Though when rumors and apparently leaks were coming out that Resi 4 was already in development, I kinda had to question if that was a really good idea for them to go for. Why would you remake 4 when you had other games to do? Besides, the original still holds up very well. I've been playing it a lot lately, and honestly, that's not anything new. I've replayed this game so many times. But I did have to sort of question why they would go for 4 and why not something like 0 or Code Veronica. A game is arguably a lot more dated and really needs more of a remake, or at least another do-over, because they really weren't perfect in the first place. The original Resident Evil 4 still holds up very well. I mean, why do you think it's been ported so many times and is often regarded as one of the best games ever made? Sure, you can criticize the controls, the limited camera angles, or the graphics, or the quick time events, but everything else, it still really holds up very well. I mean, if you're not a big fan of the graphics, you can always get the HD project for PC, which completely touches up everything, going over all the little details and all that, character models. It looks amazing. It's a very well done fan project. And yeah, I get why they decided to remake Resident Evil 4. It's because it's the most popular and most successful. They just wanted the money, really. I mean, it's not a surprise, especially how it was building up. What with Village in 2021 basically having a lot of Resident Evil 4 influence in it, as well as the VR version of the game that came out as well. The director of this remake originally didn't want to make it, stating how he thinks the original is a masterpiece and didn't know how to really improve on it. There was even apparently a lot of problems with the development of the game itself, not knowing whether they should just do a complete visual touch-up or completely remake it entirely, reimagining portions of the game. With those rumors coming out before the game was even announced, it definitely led to a lot of speculation to what the game is going to be like. But since it's been released for a while now, I've heard a lot of good things about it. Again, I've not really played it myself and I've avoided spoilers completely. I do not want to have this game spoiled for me, but you know, I've heard a lot of good things about it. There's a little bit of nitpicks here and there, but I'll give it a shot myself and see what I really think of it. It seems to really be well done from what I can tell. Besides, Shinji Mikami himself, who also directed the original 4, has been open to a remake of his original piece, even though he has long left Capcom at this point. Resident Evil 4 doesn't seem to be the only beloved horror game getting a remake. Rumors have always been circulating about a new Silent Hill game or remake coming out, and it wasn't until a few months ago where we got a Silent Hill transmission, courtesy of Konami, revealing plans to bring back the franchise, what with new games in the works as well as merch drops, and of course the biggest announcement, a Silent Hill 2 remake. Being made by Bloober Team along with Masahori Ito, the original monster designer, returning to the project, as well as Akira Yamaoka, the man behind the soundtrack and audio design. Though much like Resident Evil 4, I do have to question why Silent Hill 2 is getting remade over the first game. I mean, not just numerically, but you know, why just the second one, not the first one? It seems a bit out of order. Though much like Resident Evil 4, I have to chop up to being a money reason. It is a popular game, it is the most popular game in the franchise. This is the one that's going to get the most fan reactions, so of course they were going to go for it. It's a big task as well, especially how Silent Hill 2 is often regarded as one of the best horror games ever made. However, again, unlike Resident Evil 4, it hasn't had as many ports. There's the original PlayStation 2, there was a version on the Xbox, a PC port, and then there was the HD collection that was bundled with Silent Hill 3. So that is often regarded as one of the worst ways to play those original classics. There is the enhanced version for PC, which is a technical update made by fans, which looks really good as well, and is one of the best ways to play the original game, if you don't want to shell out for original copy, which can be a little bit pricey nowadays. Going back to the 2001 classic, yeah, it has tank controls, the camera really doesn't work, but everything else still holds up. Why else do you think it is often regarded as one of the best horror games ever made? Though if anything I am concerned about, it definitely is Bloober Team, the studio behind this new remake, as they definitely had a bit of a mixed reception. Sure, they've got a lot of positive reviews and people do generally love them, think they're really good at their craft, but others, particularly horror fans, definitely do have a bit of a bone to pick with them, specifically with their games. Like, I've not really played many of them. I think I've played like the Blair Witch Project for a few minutes and I just didn't get really into it. But from all their other games such as Layers of Fear or even something as recent as The Medium, which actually brings on Akira Yamaoka to do the soundtrack for that, it's just with a game like Silent Hill 2 2. It is a big test to remake, and handing it over to Blooper Team has definitely raised a few eyebrows and questioning if they could really take it on. Especially for what I've seen, all their other horror games don't really seem to have that big grand scale as something to Silent Hill 2 has, so it is definitely a big task for them and seeing if they are going to pull it off. And from the trailer that we got with no gameplay at all, people have already been picking at it and taking it apart, looking to see if it is going to be like the original, with the mirror scene, how the original has James looking into it with no emotion at all and just shadows cast around his face, while with the remake he's overly emoting with too much light on it, and that's kind of the worry if this game's not going to be as subtle or as clever as the original is going to be. And with news articles coming out stating how the game's going to be made with a more modern audience in mind, I definitely am sort of questioning if it is going to come out good. I will play it definitely when it does, but there is a little part of me that's a little bit scared of what's going to turn out to be. But how about we go from games that are about 20 years old getting remakes to games that are barely a decade old getting a remake? The Last of Us Part 1 is the third re-release of the game since 2013. There's the 2014 remaster back for the PlayStation 4, and now for the PlayStation 5 we seem to be getting another re-release. It was even advertised as being a remake, which in reality it was not. That was just a complete lie. It was just simply another remastering for a modern console. In fairness, I never really got into The Last of Us. I've played the first one a few years ago and I only really got a few hours in. I wasn't really compelled by the story and the gameplay didn't really connect with me. Though this new re-release has included a lot more player options, much like The Last of Us Part 2 did. However, I also did take away the multiplayer that the original had. So you do have to sort of question the purpose of it all, especially when it got released at full price at like 70 quid, which is really just asking a lot. I can see the only reason that I'm doing this is because of the high caliber the game has, what with it being one of the most critically adorned games ever, and plus probably just to complement Part 2, as well as probably the hype for the HBO series that was coming out at the time. Dead Space is a similar thing, how it's not really all that old and the original game it still really holds up very well. Hell, it's still even sold on a lot of modern platforms. You can even still buy the old game on Steam along with the remake. To me it just sounds really ridiculous. It kind of just sort of begs the question, what is the point of a remake? Something I've been asking throughout this whole video. However, I do give it a little bit more leeway, seeing as Dead Space is a bit more of a dead franchise and it seems like EA is trying to revive it, since the last game being the third one not really leaving on a high note. Much like The Last of Us, I haven't played Dead Space, either this or the remake. Neither have I played 2 or 3 or that weird spin-off Wii game, but you know, from what I've heard, this remake definitely seems pretty good, especially how it seems to actually be a proper remake, built from the ground up and not just a visual touch-up, so I do give them that. And again, EA are giving respects to a franchise that they've ignored for a long time, something that seems pretty rare of them for doing. Even though it feels like a lot of the remakes we're getting nowadays are of games that are not actually all that old, what if they were to remake a game of a very old franchise that hasn't had a new game in quite a while? Alone in the Dark is a franchise that predates Resident Evil, coming out in 1992 on old PCs and whatever old console was at the time. So seeing that it's actually getting a remake in current year is actually very exciting. Like, you look at the first game and it is very dated. If you think the first Resident Evil's dated, look at Alone in the Dark. It's even more clunkier and very of its time. Give it respect though. Again, this was like early horror games. You have to give it a little bit of leeway. It's very clearly inspired by the Resident Evil 2 remake, what with its over-the-shoulder gameplay and all that. But hey, I think it looks very good from very little that we've seen. There is a trailer with a bit of gameplay thrown in there, and that's all we really are getting to see. But I think it's really cool we're actually seeing this franchise getting resurrected again. As much as we are seeing a lot of horror remakes of classic games coming out, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, I know remakes have got a bit of a bad rep, but I think it is a good opportunity, especially if it's like old franchises or classic games that need a bit of another going over. And hey, for all you know, this could actually lead to more dead franchise coming back. Maybe something like Clock Tower or D could actually come back. Sure, I know remakes are kind of like the least inspiring thing that people can go for, but I think we could do a lot that's here. I'm just interested to see where it goes. I'm a big fan of horror games, if you cannot tell, so I'm very clearly interested in whatever these companies are going to go with. As long as they're up to good quality and respect the source material, then I'm pretty much fine with it.
Mission accomplished. Right, Leon?
Not quite. I still have to get you home safe.
So, after you take me back to my place, how about we do some, overtime?
No thanks, bro.
Ah!